today we're going to be talking about working with kids or teens in particular. We're going to look at three things. We're going to look at the uniqueness of the teenagers, their needs and their challenges, and some practical applications, practical solutions, and practical applications of working with teens. So that's what we're going to do. So teenagers, they're going through a lot of things. They're going through a lot of changes. First of all, physical changes, right? The sexual development, they're going through that. Changes that are physically appearing. Growth, they're going through, they're growing by inches, like every day. Appearances change, right? They're starting mustache, they're starting to change. And all those things are scary, right? And they're very aware of those changes and very scared, and it's a big unknown for them. So that's what's happening during this time. Also psychological changes, or the psychological not only change, but the state is they're very critical of everything that's happening around them. They're also highly sensitive, so everything that comes to them, they're they take it very closely to heart, or they are affected by it. They're starting to understand consequences. They're starting to think logically and starting to apply that in their life. Also social changes or aspects of the teenager as they're wanting to gain independence. They want to be independent. They want to do things on their own. They want to start kind of separating themselves, identifying themselves. They want to avoid the younger kids, right? They now want to separate themselves. Now I'm not a kid anymore. I'm a teenager. I'm a 12 and a half. I'm almost 13. So that so they do not want to be associated. Their circle of friends is usually small, but tight. They're very close. Their friends is like everything. The world to them. But bringing up or a fall in a relationship is huge to them. It's again, everything's so associated around their friends and around their relationship. They're also developing peer relations, how they relate to other peers, who they are, as are they a leader or a dominant, not whatever. So they're trying to figure out who they are, how they relate to their peers, how they find themselves in the social kind of circles. And so that's the social aspect. Emotional, so high mood swings, right? They can be happy, cheery, and they're like crying, and it's like, what's going on, And boys and girls, it's the emotions that they have a lot of like hormonal changes, right? So there's a chemical imbalance, chemical changes, things are happening, and they don't know what to do with that, and so it could be really just random, things could be random. A lot of attention is going on, on themselves. They pay attention to themselves because there's a lot of changes happening. So they also demand attention from others because everything's around them, around their world, And some people never grow up and still everything around me, so all that. But during that time, it's very that's kind of emotionally, that's how they are. Spiritually, this is the time when they're calling. They want to find their calling. Like they want. They're not good at hiding. So they value honesty. They want to be they want to get black and white. They value that when people are honest with them, and then they are pretty brutally honest too. If they see something, they're just like, blah, so they don't sugarcoat things much. So that's kind of the teenagers as a whole, or kind of just a brief overview, kind of like what you're dealing with. And so based on that, now we're going to look into some of the challenges that come with that age. And so one of the challenges is, they are still not born again, and this is the time when they're making that decision. So the old Adam versus the new Adam, right? The flesh, the spiritual is fighting. They're starting to develop, and they're starting to walk their walk with God. That's what. So God created everything, and God said that we need to conquer and possess, right? But devil has twisted that, and created the lust of the flesh. Also, we are created to admire and to enjoy, but devil created that in the old Adam. Is the lust of the eyes, right? And so also we are to achieve, to build, to grow. But again, with devil, it's pride of life, right? Or gordożitejskie, they are, and so that's where they're at. So the big thing is they are still, when we look at them, a lot of people think that, oh, teens, they're born in Christian families and they've been going to Sunday school and church. No, they're very much sinful, and they're very much worldly, and they're very much living, a lot of them are living a worldly life. So that this is the time when they're going to make that decision, and that's the time. A lot of times is that during so that's one of the challenges that's in that time. Another challenge right now, or for them in this, for teenagers, adolescents, so is peer relationships. So how they see and how they interact with others, their friendships. We talked about those, right? A little bit like that is really real to them, and how they see themselves as compared to the rest of the world, compared to their peers. So if they don't develop a positive relationship as when they're within their peers, when they're in teenagers, a lot of times that reflects on them later on in their life. You see those stories that say, oh, I was a geek, but look at me now, all big buff guy, but they were so hurt or so affected by the way they were treated when they were little, then they dedicate their whole life to like working out and being a bodybuilder or something. And so that's what happens in this early stage, or this teenage stage, is that peer relationships and how they find. And so a lot of times, it relates if they don't find themselves or they develop a strong self-image, they go to substance abuse or depression, all those things. Teens have also, this says like teens that have friends that are good friends, they have a better self-esteem, emotional support, and guidance. So almost 70% of girls that were surveyed said that they wish they had help finding friends and developing and finding a sense of belonging and finding. So that's one of the challenges. The other challenges right now is pornography. About 50% of boys and 32% of girls view porn during their teenage years. About first exposure is amongst boys is about 12 years old on average. That's when they are first exposed to that. 71% of teens, I want to say 100% of teens, hide online behavior from their parents. We do too, right? And nobody really knows what's the online activities, the social sites, everything that's happening, right? So from our kind of work with teens, and I would say maybe more than 50% of male students or male kids that have been exposed to some sort of pornography. Anytime they have a phone or anything, that's the challenge right now. It's the 2018 study. This is an older study, but say that about 27% of teens receive inappropriate messages or inappropriate text messages or pictures, and maybe about 15% are sending inappropriate images, either of self or other images to others, to their peers and their friends. And then one of the studies said that 57% of teens search out porn at least once a month. So again, this is an older study after like COVID, lockdowns, where everybody got a computer and sat at home, being bored. I'm sure these numbers are different. And again, from our experience in working with the teens in our churches, we've talked to them, and a lot of them are like, hey, I have a problem, I have an issue with this. So another problem is social media. So their social acceptance and their view of themselves, self-image, is related to social media. They get that image or who they are, they build their self-esteem, they build their persona on social media. Also, bullying happens on social media. We know cases where kids would just create a page on Instagram that just, for example, like, I don't know, mistakes or things that we caught, and then they would go and record their own peers in church doing something or picking on someone, or if they failed at something, and then they would post it on Instagram, and people would just mock and laugh, and the whole world pretty much sees it, and they're coming back, bruised, and not only but like pretty hurt about by them being laughed at and mocked. Social media also has been identified as not only, it's been kind of like the biggest phenomenon, or has been one of the biggest factors to leading to suicide because of that. So you got to understand, like what we talked about, like if we're kind of things being built on, right? They're going through physical changes, emotional, spiritual, right? There's a lot of changes that are happening, and then all of a sudden they're seeing themselves, comparing themselves. Then there's this bullying, and everything else is happening, and then a lot of times addictions happen. And then they're in this rut, they're having problems with their family, with themselves, they can't conquer something. And a lot of times, social media leads to all these things build on, and social media leads to like pornography and everything else, and then it leads to suicide and depression. That's another thing that we see within teenagers. We know people talking to us and saying, hey, or we're finding girls that are cutting themselves because of depression, that talked about suicide. And have, like, the statistics say that 60% of high school students have reported that they have seriously contemplated committing suicide. And I think a lot of people thought about, but those that are well balanced, they go, oh, okay, snap out of it and be like, hey, stop wallowing in your sorrow, let's move on. But the goods that are in that kind of never-ending cycle, they can't snap out of it, and then they get encouraged. And social media, I guess there's a video, like 13 ways or 13 reasons to kill yourself, and then there's people finding that stuff and then acting, or not acting, but it's not helping them any to get out of it. So also challenges like family, within the family there's some abuse, there's some challenge like divorce, all those things. It's all heavily laid and very hard on the kids right now. So vaping, it's one of those things that people start to experiment with, and right now it looks cool, it's advertised as, oh, you can make all these cool clouds, and you can do all these tricks and stuff, and they get, oh, I want to try this, and so it's presented as a cool thing, and next thing they know, it's very addictive and also harmful. And now we had nurses that said, worked in pediatric units that said they've had kids that are dying from it because they're either getting bad stuff, or it's just basically clogging up their lungs and then they're dying. So those are the challenges. So that's what kids are going through. Their needs, just like anybody else, they are in the need to be born again. Their need to be for salvation, right? We're all sinners, right? Every single one of them, and as I mentioned before, you can't just say, oh, all of them are just no. Every single person needs to make a decision, and every single person needs to repent and be born again. There's the payment of sin is death. That's if you haven't repented, and there's only one way. There's only one God. You gotta go through repentance, salvation, and live accordingly, right? According to the Bible. So that's that's a need, and everybody, that's a human need, as everybody needs to go through that, right? The other thing is just freedom and self-realization. So finding themselves, who they are, identification. Who am I within the body of Christ, within this world? How am I glorifying God? What do I do with my life? How do I find freedom from everything that's, that old self, Adam versus flesh versus spirit, right? The constant fight. How do I find that? They are longing for that. They need that. So also they need mentorship, guidance. Nastav юношу в начале пути его, right? And then he will not depart from. Just read it here, right here. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. They're looking for somebody to train them, to mentor them, to guide them through all the changes that are happening, through all the challenges that are happening in their life. They need that someone to stand with them and go, hey, this is how it is. I've been through this too. I've been there. I know exactly what you're talking about. This is how I overcame. This is how I overcame. This is how I beat whatever it is, either addiction or the challenge with like self-identification or self-image, dealing with friends, dealing with bullies. They need, they're searching for that mentorship and guidance. And then friendship and belonging, like where do I belong? How, I want to have friends. We are meant to be part of a community, or have support and support others, serve others. So let's go into some practical solutions. Like, okay, what do we do? How do we support these kids? What's the answer, right? So some of the practical solutions. So what is most important, or what makes the most impact? Let me ask you guys, from like your first grade, right? Do you remember what you were taught in the first grade? But do you remember your teacher and how they made you feel? Yes. Do you remember if they were cool or not, or if you really got along with them? What about Sunday school? Do you remember the lessons in Sunday school? How about last Sunday? What was the preacher, the first preacher talking about last Sunday? So, we only remember, or only 10% from a lesson is we pay attention to words, what we get out of it. Or in the classroom, we only remember about 10% of words, what's being told to us. 30% in the classroom of what the teacher does is the actions. We'll remember what they did. We'll remember what, if they got somebody and put them in the corner, or do you remember if the teacher was, had a bad habit of some sort? We talked about like, did they fall asleep in the classroom, right? Or did they, the Soviet Union, did they beat you with a stick, So you remember those actions. But the most thing that you will remember is how they made you feel and who they were, who that person was. And then when you go back, it's like every single time the kids will be drawn to someone what their qualities are, who that person is. That's what matters most. That's 60% of your lesson. So the point here is you got to make sure that you are, first of all, working on yourself. Your spiritual stance, how you are with God, how you are, the reasons why you're doing this. We'll go into that later, a little bit later. Another solution or another practical application is what the kids need, the needs of a child. They need communication. They need some intellectual stimulation, or the need is intellectual, and they need to provide input, their own input. So let me apply this to a real life scenario. Whenever there's a kid that's misbehaving, or there's a kid that's having, not paying attention, or not whatever, doing something in the back, talking, chatting, whatever, they're usually probably missing one of these three, or they're not connected to one of the three. So intellectual, to be smart, to feel like they're getting the material, that they're smart, they're getting it, that they are relating to material. Communication is to be needed. They want to be communicated, like, hey, I want to listen to you. You are needed. I pay attention to you. I want to communicate to you. I want to talk to you. I want to hear your ideas. And the other one is to be valued, or to put their input. I want to have my little piece into this puzzle. I want to contribute to the pot. I want to contribute to what we're doing here. So usually when a kid is misbehaving, you gotta look at that. Do they feel smart? Do they get the material? A lot of times they're disconnected because they just don't get it, or they're bored, or they don't just like, this is not relatable to me, I don't care. So they check out. So make it relatable, like, oh, hey, change it, and then bring it up. If I was to do this, and then Fyodor here, he went to this way, boom, they click. It's like, wait a second, they're talking about me. How am I involved in this? Another thing is like, if they're like own input, like, oh, can you make me some copies? Go run to the teacher's conference and make me some copies, or wipe off the board or something, But this is for like little kids. But in the grown, the same idea. It's kind of like, hey, how do we involve them into this, into my lesson, into my environment? How do I do that? So, and also like get their ideas. Like they want to be needed. Like, hey, I need to hear what do you think about this? And some of these practical things that I'll give you guys, it talks about that, getting them involved, and it gives you the exact steps, like what to do. There's more to that, but the basic idea is that they want to feel smart, they want to feel needed, like in communication, and they want to provide some of that input into the change. So if something's going on, you go back to the stop, like, hey, what's going on? What's happening with this kid? And you add one. The other one is understanding what's happening. So, like we talked about, like what is going on, like really understanding what's happening and your importance in this picture, or how you fit as a teenager or as a leader of a teenage group, right? Being aware, this is what's happening to them. This is what they're bombarded with on a daily. You have this opportunity, this amazing opportunity to make possibly an impact that will last eternity. You can affect this kid's trajectory for the rest of their life and as I said, eternity. That is why you're there, you know? So is understanding this and then getting this, saying, okay, I'm dedicated. This next thing is dedication. One thing I've noticed is some, not here, I mean, some churches, our church, there's a little bit of a pattern, right? Some parents, their kids go into choir, kids choir, the parents are in teens choir, or kids choir. Then the kids go into teens, the parents are in the teens ministry or whatever. Then the kids go to youth, I don't know where parents go, I don't know. But they get a driver's license, and the parents are like, oh, I did my job. So, dedication, why are you here? Why are you doing what you're doing? What's your motivation? Is it because, and I've been there before, and there's nothing wrong with that, where you are exploring. You're kind of like, what is my ministry? I mean, I've been in choir, I've been in worship group, visitations, but then we had cell groups, and we had Sunday school. I was involved in all of that. And it was a time of exploration. I was young, I was like, hey, what is, and then slowly things started kind of falling apart. Like, I started falling away from those things because I'm like, choir, I'm here for the friends, really, you know. So then, elimination, process of elimination, I'm like, hey, Sunday school is really, that's something I stuck to. Because one thing it did for me is it kept me accountable. Every time I had to stop, I had to open the Word, I had to prepare, I had to say, I had to bring something. I had to feed myself in order to be able to bring something. It couldn't be just like waiting. And I knew that every time I had a bad lesson, I knew exactly why. Every time I knew that it was because of my spiritual why. It was because of that's what's happening. And I knew exactly why. Because spiritually I was low. Physically I wasn't able to prepare or do a good enough job to prepare. And then it reflected back on the kids. And then so that being dedicated 100% and saying like, hey, being honest with yourself, like, why am I doing this? What? And then understanding and looking for ways to constantly adapt. That's when you're always like, you're not just like, oh, just read the lesson, do my thing, and go home. No, you're constantly looking. Again, like the world is adapting. That's what we've talked about. Daniel talked about this. We're talking about this right now. This is what the kids are going through. You can't be still applying old methods to the kids nowadays. Cover topics that are interesting and applicable to them. So talk about this. We do that. This teen camp, we talked about purity. And that's where I'm talking about, like the boys afterwards come up and talk to us about this. I'm like, hey, this is the problem I have. And a lot of guys were there, a lot of like male leaders, and they're like, hey, I went through this, this is how I overcame, this is what I did. We're very honest, very blunt, and very open. And saying, hey, this is how it was, this is how it is, and this is what God did for me, and all this. So the boys they love those topics. They love to see they love to see that they're not alone in this. Same thing with the girls. I mean, we had same thing after camp, after they opened up, like, hey, one girl is cutting herself because she's in bad depression, she's been going through some tough stuff. Same thing with the girls, same thing with boys and the way they interact with them. There are a couple of girls that are, in the classroom, they're acting very loosely, they're dressed not modestly, but like knowing them, knowing their families, or knowing what's going on, you know that their dad is absent. Their dad has problems, he has issues. And these girls are acting up that way. And then it's up to you to kind of like see that and then be like, okay, how do we work with this kid? What do we do? This is these things, again, they will have an impact. It could have an impact on eternity. So that's why it's important to talk about those things openly. Involve parents. And then I'm not saying don't teach like theology, do theological, do it, but also make sure that it's applicable, so they're getting it and they're understanding how it works. Involve parents too. This is a hard one. I know I've been there before. In Sunday school, we had to do parent-teacher conferences, and I dreaded them. I dreaded them like what am I, like a 22 or a 20-year-old kid? What am I going to tell these 50-year-old kids or parents about their kids? Oh, no. It's hard, but you got to do it. Some of these parents still to this day like, oh, we appreciate you so much that what you did and when you were with me and when we worked on together around my kid. When you brought up those specific issues. We dread those things. They're hard. Just do them. Just do them. Call the parent. Say, I want to talk to you. These are the things I'm noticing. Here are the patterns that I'm seeing. You don't have to get into details. You can just say, hey, here are the patterns that I'm seeing, and I'm honestly concerned. You got to look at the kids as souls, because that's what the devil looks. He doesn't look at their family. So a lot of times, like, how am I going to call this person? They're so and so last name, and you're like, no. They are still, as I said, Satan doesn't look at them as, secret of each or whatever, He looks at them as a soul that he's going to take for the rest of eternity. And he's going to attack them and with the addictions and stuff. Some of the kids that come up to us, and you're like, this kid? I'd never expect, It doesn't matter. The devil doesn't look at the families. He doesn't, and there's a theory that maybe even those that are more attacked, that are in the families that are, that are serving families and stuff. The devil doesn't care. It's a soul. And that's what you need to look at. Don't look at how am I going to talk to this family or this person? No. How are you going to talk to God when He's going to tell you, what did you do when I gave you the opportunity? If you knew that you needed to do something good and you didn't do it, what does that mean? It's a sin, right? So that's why you got these kids for this 30 minutes, an hour, 2 days, 3 days, if you're going, camping, hiking, skiing. That's what I'm talking about. The next thing is develop those relationships. That's how you get to know them. That's how you get to discover what's going on. Like, we had a girl went to a missionary. And in the missionary, we went to Ukraine. And usually what happens is it's kind of like a pressure cooker, basically. So if you guys are aware or you're familiar with this in the business, it's called forming, storming, norming, and performing. Those are the 4 stages of a team, how the team develops. So when you form with a new team, first everybody's really nice to each other. Oh, they don't want to step on anybody's toes. They want to be really super nice. They want to be really nice. But then time goes by, things get annoying. You get tired. You get fed up with things, and you go. People start complaining, start butting heads. That's called storming. That's when people start. Then when you kind of talk through things and you identify, oh, that's why they were doing. Then you kind of learn what drives them. Then you go, oh, okay. Then things start to get normalized. And then you get to the performing. Then you don't think about all these things, what she thinks about me, what he thinks, or what she may say, what he may say. Then you just perform, you just do stuff. And so when we go to Ukraine, week 1, end of week 1 is my storming phase. I know that, 100%. Because in that environment, when you are taken away from your home, from your family, from all your luxuries, you're put on the floor, you're eating some food that you don't really know where it came from, and it looks kind of funky, and then sometimes you get sick with a stomach bug, and then you're mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually exhausted, and then after that week, you're done with your teammates. If she took your iron or whatever, ploika, whatever you call it, a stringy iron, you don't have those niceness. Oh, I'm going to smack you with that thing, So, and we had that thing. That's what happens. That first week, and I know it. I'm waiting. I'm sitting there. I'm like, right. I know exactly what's going to happen. End of week 1, storming phase hits. Because the forming goes out the door within because it's so tight or it's such a hard. So you get to know them right away. And then afterwards they talk it out, they figure out, then they're like, oh, that's what she meant. That's what's going on with her. So one of the girls loses it. First week, cusses out the whole team, like straight up, like we're blown away. What is going on? We sit down, we start talking to her. Okay, what your behavior? What's going on? We're in a Christian camp. We're leaders in the camp. We came from America to these now, and then you just do this. Later on, we find out that divorced family, father was abusive, has a lot of like issues. The girl, and she came there. She needed healing herself. But again, we would have never known if we weren't in that environment, if we were not in the camp. And then thank God we had that, the healing moment. The team supported her. People understood what's happening with this person. They understood that this individual needs love, needs support, needs God, and that's why she's here. She came back later on again, and every time, norming and then performing, so every team that comes back, they're like, this is the best team, because they go through those things, they understand each other, everybody's on that same wavelength, they know exactly, they're not being questioned or whatever, not thinking what somebody else is going to think. So they're like, oh, this is the best team. It's like every team was like the best team, they come back, and it's like that performing stage. The unfortunate part is they all we come back to here, and then it's like everybody goes their own way. But, and this girl, again, she got married, she has kids, she really, great businesswoman and all that. But you would have not known if you were not in that environment. If you did not take, if we were not in a campsite, or if we were not going for a hike, or if we were doing something, getting to know those kids, developing these close relationships. And I know, we're talking about, you're here, oh, I want to know what to do in my classroom. I want to know. Once you figure out, you get to know, once you figure out what each kid is in your classroom is dealing with and kind of know, you kind of figure out, okay, this is what I need for my team. I've had this before where I just take the whole class. For Sunday school, we would go hiking. And we just say, hey, we're going to go on Saturday, we're going to take a whole hike, and then we're going to do this. And so you develop those, and then we do small groups like fishing or whatever, sports. Those things, that's how you find those, or make those connections. The other thing, in classroom, right, if you wanted to know, what do I want to do? I'm going to have more information. This is where the packets come from. That's why I didn't want you to start flipping through. But I'll give you the packets. Those are the nitty gritty, the practical solutions in the classroom. Involve them in the learning process. Have them be part of it, right? That's coming back to the circle, right? The three needs. They should have an opportunity to express their opinion. Let them know how they're feeling, what they're thinking about it. And I've had this before when we were sitting there and we were talking with the kids one-on-one. We were not one-on-one. We were in a classroom setting, and we just all shared the way the lesson was about being born again. And just asked each kid, when did you have this moment where you made a decision to serve God? Let me just straight up and just talk to each other. And one of the kids said, no, I don't believe in God. Straight up. Just like that, and said, no, I don't. And we're like, as a Christian, we're in teen service, and so you're kind of you all these things go through your mind, you kind of, what do I do? And then it's like, no, this person needs that attention. And you would have not known if you did not have that opportunity to sit down, listen to them, get their feedback. Sometimes they say things, and you're like, whoa, hold on a second. That's way off field, dude. What are you talking about? So then give them the opportunity, find those ways to seek what's inside the heart. We talked about the interest learning, keep that in there, and material should correspond to their needs right now. We talked, that's what's in your classrooms. And multi-level tasks, right? Different. If we are very, me, I like technology and stuff, and I can lean toward that. And we've seen that teachers will do what they're most comfortable with. If somebody's really comfortable with drawing, they'll lean to that. So change it up, use different things. And then also, when kids are can we do this, or can we do that? So throw it back at them. Don't try to solve their problems or try to solve their situation. Give it right back to them. Say, okay, no, you guys can do this, you guys can do this, and just kind of guide along and kind of participate with them. And don't overload with information. Kind of when we talked about the whole 10% of what the spoken message is. The rest is who the person is. That's your relationship with them, and that will go much further than what you're saying, what you're doing, than what you're actually who you are. So that's why it's very important to wrap it up or to sum it up. Kids are teenagers right now. They're going through a lot. like physically, emotionally, spiritually, right? Mentally. A lot of, and it doesn't help that this thing is always right there, right next to you. And then like Snapchat, for example. As soon as you click on it, like if you look only for your whoever you talk to, then that's that, right? But as soon as you go into kind of like the regular or whatever you call it, right away there's loosely dressed people. There's things that, like, they know that I'm a guy, right? There's gonna be cars, like supercars. There's gonna be something like that. Then there's like sports and all that. And then there's gonna be somebody that's halfway dressed, you know, because so that's what's gonna, so this is as simple as that. Like, they already know, and it's called like target marketing. And it's algorithms and all that. They find it, they pinpoint, and they want you to be attached to this. And that's as simple as that, as a simple way, like a communication thing. But it's the whole world and the system belongs to Satan, and it's set up by him against the Christian, right? And so that's what the teenagers are going through. That it's great that you guys want to work with them. It's great, but being aware, like first of all, holding yourself accountable, holding yourself, and saying that, hey, I'm going to be 100% dedicated. I'm going to watch my spiritual walk. And I'm going to give 100%, and constantly adapt, constantly change, and constantly find ways to connect with the kids, constantly alter your methods, look for ways to connect and to make an impact again, and that impact is going to be eternal. So that's my lesson. Questions? Any challenges that you guys have going